A 600-foot car carrier caught fire, drifted for weeks, then quietly disappeared into the Pacific. A mysterious fire, thousands of cars, and weeks of silence before the ocean finally claimed the Morning Midas. And here's where the story really starts to take shape. The ship at the center of this was called the Morning Midas. Not a small operation, not some aging rust bucket barely holding together. This was a full-scale car and truck carrier built for one job, moving massive numbers of brand new vehicles across oceans. She stretched 600 feet long, about the length of 2 football fields laid end to end. Built back in 2006, the Morning Midas had already spent years quietly doing what most people never notice, feeding the global auto supply chain. Thousands of cars at a time, loaded deck by deck, rolled on and rolled off like clockwork. The ship sailed under a Liberian flag, a common setup in international shipping, and was managed by Zodiac Maritime, a London-based company that handles vessels all over the world. Nothing about this voyage looked unusual on paper. The Morning Midas had departed from Yantai, China, heading east across the Pacific toward Lázaro Cárdenas, Mexico, a major port built to handle large-scale vehicle imports. The mission was simple: deliver new vehicles to the Mexican market, business as usual. But that's what makes this unsettling. Ships like this are the backbone of modern car transport. They're everywhere, constantly moving, rarely in the headlines. And yet this one didn't make news for delivering cars. It made news because it never arrived. Have you ever stopped to think how many vehicles are crossing the ocean right now, stacked inside ships just like this? And how quickly something routine can turn into a global story? And this is where the stakes quietly skyrocket. The Morning Midas wasn't just hauling cars, it was packed. 3,159 vehicles in total, according to later reports. Early headlines rounded it to about 3,000. But the updated number matters because every single one of those vehicles went down with the ship. Most of the cargo was made up of conventional gasoline-powered vehicles, the kind shipped across oceans every day without much attention. But mixed in were 65 to 70 fully electric vehicles, along with 680 to 681 hybrid or partial hybrid cars. That detail would soon dominate the entire conversation. Why? Because fires involving EVs are different, harder to control, hotter, more unpredictable, and that fact would come back in a big way. Below deck, the ship was also carrying enormous amounts of fuel, about 350 metric tons of gas fuel and 1,530 metric tons of very low sulfur fuel oil. That's not just cargo, that's a floating energy source. Here's the part that still isn't clear. No one has confirmed whether a single vehicle was removed before the ship finally sank. Salvage crews arrived days later, but by then, the damage was already serious. So the question hangs in the air. Was this just a cargo loss or a warning the industry wasn't ready to hear? And then everything changed. On June 3, 2025, while crossing the North Pacific, the Morning Midas sent out a distress alert. The ship was sitting roughly 300 miles south-southwest of Adak Island, deep in international waters. Far from help, far from land. Crew members reported smoke rising from the stern, not a little haze. Thick, unmistakable smoke, pouring out from one specific area, the deck carrying electric vehicles. Within hours, the situation escalated. The U.S. Coast Guard picked up the emergency alert and began coordinating a response. Aircraft were dispatched for overflights, and the first images told a troubling story. A massive plume of dark smoke stretching into the sky, visible from miles away. This wasn't a fire you just spray and move on from. It was burning inside a steel box, surrounded by vehicles, wiring, batteries, and fuel. The kind of scenario every mariner fears. Have you ever seen footage of a ship burning in the open ocean? There's nowhere to run, no fire department down the street, just water, smoke, and time working against you. And for the Morning Midas, time was about to run out. This is the moment where training meets reality. There were 22 crew members on board when the fire broke out. As soon as smoke was detected, the crew followed protocol. On-board fire suppression systems were deployed, and emergency procedures kicked in fast. This wasn't panic, it was experience. But shipboard firefighting has limits, especially when the fire involves vehicles packed tightly together. Heat builds, visibility drops, access becomes impossible. And when electric vehicles are part of the equation, the risk multiplies. Once the fire refused to die down, the crew had to face the hardest call any mariner could make. They chose survival. The order came to abandon ship. Lifeboats were launched into open Pacific waters, a decision that likely saved every life on board. Shortly after, the merchant vessel Costco Hellas diverted and pulled off the rescue. All 22 crew members were recovered safely. No injuries, no missing names. It's the brutal trade-off of the sea. Steel and cargo can be replaced. People can't. The Morning Midas was left behind, but every crew member went home. Would you have waited longer or made the same call? Just when it looked like the ship might be lost for good, help arrived. Salvage teams reached the Morning Midas days after the fire, taking over a situation that was already dangerously unstable. The operation was led by Resolve Marine, specialists in marine firefighting and recovery. By June 9th, the tug Gretchen Dunlap was on scene, holding position near the drifting carrier and beginning suppression efforts. A week later, on June 15th, the specialized firefighting tug Garth Foss arrived, bringing more equipment and manpower. Fighting a fire at sea isn't like fighting one on land. There's no stable footing, no guaranteed water pressure, and no way to fully access the burning decks. Every move depends on the weather, visibility, and what the ship will allow. On June 16th, salvage teams reported something that sounded hopeful: no signs of active fire. But even without flames, the damage was already done. Heat had warped the steel, systems were compromised, and out there in the open ocean, victory can turn into failure without warning. And this is the part most people don't realize. After the crew was evacuated, the Morning Midas became a ghost ship, drifting unmanned in the Pacific. No engines running, no crew correcting ballast. No one is fighting the slow, silent damage happening below deck. The fire had weakened the ship's structure, and the Pacific wasn't in a forgiving mood. Heavy weather rolled in, waves slamming a vessel that could no longer defend itself. Over time, water began seeping in, deck by deck, space by space. This wasn't dramatic, it was gradual, relentless. Nearly 3 weeks passed between the fire and the sinking. And that's the thing about ship fires. Even when flames go out, the danger doesn't. Burned wiring fails, seals break, steel loses strength. Ships don't always sink in the moment of crisis. Sometimes they sink long after the world stops watching, and the Morning Midas was running out of time. And then came the moment everyone feared, but almost nobody saw coming. On June 23, 2025, at approximately 4:35 p.m. local time, UTC-9, the Morning Midas finally gave in. After nearly 3 weeks drifting in silence, the ship slipped beneath the surface of the North Pacific. This didn't happen near a port. It didn't happen close to help. The carrier sank in international waters, roughly 360 nautical miles from land, or about 415 miles away, near Alaska's Aleutian Islands. Beneath it waited darkness, nearly 5,000 meters deep, more than 16,400 feet straight down. Once it started going, there was no stopping it. According to the ship's manager, Zodiac Maritime, the causes were painfully clear. The fire damage had already compromised the vessel's internal structure. Weeks of heavy weather battered a ship that couldn't fight back. And slowly, steadily, water seeped in, overwhelming what was left of its integrity. No explosion, no final blaze, just gravity doing its job. Zodiac Maritime confirmed the sinking in a statement, marking the end of a ship that had left China loaded with cars and never made it to Mexico. One moment, it was a drifting problem. Next, it was part of the ocean floor. Have you ever noticed how the most expensive disasters sometimes end without noise? As soon as the ship went under, the focus shifted fast, from steel and cargo to the ocean itself. The U.S. Coast Guard confirmed that there was no visible pollution immediately after the sinking. That line mattered. With the amount of fuel on board, everyone was watching closely. Even after the ship disappeared, 2 salvage tugs remained on site, equipped with pollution control gear, scanning the water for fuel sheens, debris, or anything drifting to the surface. This wasn't a quick check. It was continuous monitoring. As an added safeguard, a specialized pollution response vessel was dispatched to the area. The goal was simple: be ready before something goes wrong, not after. And the risk was real. The Morning Midas went down carrying hundreds of tons of fuel. At that depth, recovery isn't an option. The only defense left is speed and preparation. That's why response time matters. Once fuel spreads in the open ocean, control becomes almost impossible. So far, the sea has stayed calm, but everyone involved knows how fast that can change. And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable. The fire on the Morning Midas started on a deck carrying electric vehicles. That fact alone reignited a debate the maritime industry has been quietly struggling with for years. Lithium-ion battery fires behave differently. They burn hotter. They're harder to smother. And once they start, they can reignite without warning. At sea, inside a steel ship packed tight with vehicles, that's a nightmare scenario. Traditional vehicle fires can often be contained. EV fires, not so simple. Cooling, isolation, and time are critical, and ships don't always have the space or systems designed for that level of control. That's why concern is growing. More EVs are being shipped every year, but safety standards haven't fully caught up. Suppression systems designed decades ago weren't built with high-density battery cargo in mind. There's no official confirmation that an EV battery caused the fire. But the location, behavior, and intensity of the blaze have raised serious questions. So here's the bigger issue. If this can happen once, how many ships are crossing the ocean right now with the same risk on board? And is the industry truly ready for what comes next? And here's the part that makes this feel less like a freak accident and more like a pattern. The Morning Midas isn't the first car carrier to catch fire, and it won't be the last. In 2023, the Fremantle Highway burned out of control while carrying vehicles, including electric models. The crew had to evacuate, and the ship drifted as responders scrambled to contain the damage. Go back another year to 2022, and you hit the Felicity Ace. That fire lasted nearly 2 weeks. Thousands of luxury cars are on board, EVs among the cargo, and in the end, the ship sank, taking everything with it. Then there's the Sincerity Ace in 2018, another car carrier fire that forced evacuation and raised early alarms about how quickly vehicle fires can overwhelm a ship. The similarities are hard to ignore. Fires that spread rapidly. Crews were forced to abandon ship. Electric or hybrid vehicles are involved, adding complexity and danger. And every time responders are fighting an uphill battle in the open ocean. What's frustrating is that these incidents keep happening, and the lessons from them still feel only partially applied. So the question becomes, how many warnings does the industry need before change actually sticks? And this is where the Morning Midas stops being just one ship's story. After previous disasters, including deadly fires, the Dutch Safety Board stepped in with recommendations, calling for stronger emergency response systems on major shipping routes. Better coordination, faster action, smarter planning. But fires like this keep exposing gaps. Modern car carriers are still relying on fire suppression systems that weren't designed for dense EV cargo. Regulations around transporting electric vehicles are evolving, but slowly. And crew training hasn't always kept pace with the risks posed by lithium-ion batteries at sea. That leads to the biggest issue of all, accountability. When ships burn, sink, and vanish into deep water, it's easy for responsibility to fade with them. But the cost, financial, environmental, and human, keeps rising. The Morning Midas didn't just sink. It added pressure to an industry already under scrutiny. And now the world is watching to see whether this time, something actually changes. And when the smoke clears, this is what's left behind. Questions. Could the fire have been contained earlier, before it spread beyond control? Or was the ship already fighting a losing battle the moment flames reached tightly packed vehicles? That leads straight to the bigger concern. Were the risks tied to EV cargo underestimated from the start? Then there's the timeline. Why did the Morning Midas survive for weeks, only to sink long after the fire was declared out? Was structural damage worse than expected, or did the weather quietly finish what flames began? Insurance and liability now come into play. A ship was lost. 3,159 vehicles gone. Multiple companies are involved. Determining responsibility won't be simple or quick. And those vehicles, they now sit 5 kilometers beneath the surface. Unreachable, unsalvageable, effectively erased. The ocean closed the case physically. On paper, it's just beginning. The Morning Midas didn't just sink, it exposed serious cracks in how modern ships handle new technology. As EVs dominate global trade, the ocean is becoming an unforgiving testing ground. The real question is whether the industry will act before the next fire tells an even darker story.